She was supposed to be a joke. Two skinny twin girls were shoved toward a school stage so people could laugh at them, not listen to them. Not listen to them. Nobody knew that when their voices finally rose, an entire auditorium would fall silent, and a single dad named Nathan Cole would watch his quiet, broken life crack open and start again. But this story didn't begin on that stage. It started on a freezing November afternoon, on a lonely road cutting through the flat, wind-scraped plains of Nebraska. The heater in Nathan's old blue pickup coughed more than it worked. Sleet tapped the windshield in nervous fingers as the wipers dragged back and forth, fighting to keep his view clear. Pine trees blurred by, bare and black against the sky, the color of dirty ice. He'd driven this road from the lumberyard to his cabin so many times he could have done it with his eyes closed. Lately, it all felt the same, gray, quiet, heavy. Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the ache in his knuckles, the familiar burn in his shoulders. His hands looked older than 40. Grief did that. Working with wood did that. Raising a daughter alone absolutely did that. He should have been thinking about dinner, or the leaky pipe under the sink, or the pile of unpaid bills stacked on the counter. Instead, his mind drifted, as it always did, to the girl waiting for him at home. Ava Cole, his daughter, his miracle, his heartbreak. She hadn't spoken a full sentence in almost 2 years. He was rounding the bend near the old abandoned rail yard when he saw it, something he'd passed 100 times, but that somehow felt different today. An old rusted shipping container set off the side of the road, just beyond the ditch, its red paint scraped down to tired metal. Usually the doors were shut tight, but today one of them hung slightly open, rocking with the wind. Nathan might have kept driving, might have told himself it was nothing, just the weather prying at old hinges. But then he saw the hand, small, thin, slapping weakly at the metal from inside. He hit the brakes hard. Gravel spit out from under the tires as the truck slid a few feet before stopping. His heart slammed against his ribs. He barely remembered throwing the door open, boots crunching into icy slush as he ran. The wind knifed through his jacket, but fear burned hotter than the cold. "Hello," he shouted, stumbling toward the container. "Hey, somebody there?" No answer, just the whistle of the wind and a soft, broken sound from inside. He grabbed the edge of the heavy door and yanked. It screeched on rusted hinges, swinging wide with a shudder. Nathan froze. Two girls, maybe 10 years old, were curled up on a moldy blanket in the dark, their knees pulled to their chests, their cheeks bright red from the cold. One clutched a crumpled paper snowflake in a shaking hand. Were curled as some about. The other looked straight at him with huge, tired eyes that were too calm for a child sitting in a metal box on a freezing afternoon. "Please," the bolder one whispered. The daunter one whispered, "Don't tell them we hid here." For a moment, Nathan couldn't speak. It was like someone had reached inside his chest and crushed his heart in their fist. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around both of them at once, pulling them close as if they'd always been his. "We're not talking about anything right now," he said, voice rough. "Right now, we're getting you warm. Come on. Come on." The quieter twin flinched when he touched her, then relaxed when she felt the heat of his coat. Her small fingers grabbed onto his sleeve and didn't let go. "Are you gonna call somebody?" the first girl asked, suspicious, scared. "Tut, I might," Nathan answered honestly as he lifted her sister into his arms. "But first, I'm going to save your lives." The cabin sat where the trees began to thicken, a small wood and stone place tucked at the edge of Pine Hollow. It looked like all the weight of the winters it had survived rested in its tilted roof and weathered porch. Inside, though, the wood stove roared once Nathan got it going, swallowing split logs and spitting out waves of heat. Within an hour, the girls were in dry clothes, old sweats and flannel shirts that had once been too big for Ava, and sitting on the couch under a faded quilt. Their noses were pink, their damp hair stuck to their foreheads. Steam curled from the mugs of hot cocoa on the coffee table. Nathan sat on the chair across from them, elbows on his knees, trying to act calm while his brain screamed with questions. "What are your names?" he asked gently. "Anna," the brave one said immediately. Lifting her chin, she nudged the girl beside her. "And that's Alice. We're twins, 10. Well, 9 3/4, she corrected like it really mattered. Nathan's lips twitched. Pretty specific. A ma'am said numbers matter, Anna replied, then flinched just slightly at the word mom. "Oh, where is she now?" Nathan asked softly. Anna's gaze dropped to her hands. Alice clutched the hem of the quilt, eyes glossy. "She left," Anna murmured. "We live with Aunt Carla now." She's supposed to take care of us, but she said if we cried one more time, she'd leave us in the woods and not come back. Her voice wobbled. We thought the container was better than the woods, better than the woods. Nathan swallowed hard. He'd heard stories like this. Sometimes they ended with caseworkers and second chances. Sometimes they ended with police tape and names on the news. He stood slowly. I'll be right back, he said. Stay here, please. You're safe in this house. He stepped into the hallway, his shoulders suddenly twice as heavy. Halfway down was a closed door, the paint around the handle worn by years of knocking. He lifted his hand and tapped gently. He waited anyway, listening, hoping for footsteps, a shifting bed, something. The quiet pressed against him, thick and familiar. 2 years ago, his daughter had stepped onto a middle school auditorium stage to sing in front of her classmates. She'd opened her mouth, looked out at a sea of faces and phones and whispers, and something inside her had snapped. She fainted before she finished the first verse. Someone posted the video online. The teasing never stopped. Eventually, the words did. She'd been diagnosed with selective mutism. Nathan didn't care what label they gave it. All he knew was that his bright, loud, music-loving kid had folded in on herself, shrinking smaller every day. He tried everything. Doctors, therapists, moving schools, homeschooling. Nothing pulled her fully back. She lived in the house like a shadow, present but quiet, eyes always just a little sad. He had no idea how to bring her voice home again. He also had no idea what bringing 2 traumatized twins into the same house would do to her. But he knew one thing for certain. He could not drive away tonight and pretend he hadn't seen those little hands beating against cold metal. Back in the living room, Alice had started humming under her breath. Just a thin, shaky sound at first, like she wasn't even aware of it. A tune that sounded half like a lullaby and half like a memory. Anna closed her eyes and joined in, her voice slightly off-key, wobbling but warm. Their harmonies were imperfect, but there was something about them, raw and innocent and stubborn, that wrapped around the room like a blanket. Halfway through the second phrase, Nathan heard it. The soft creak of Ava's bedroom door opening down the hall. He didn't turn, didn't move, just listened. Bare feet padded across the old hardwood. He caught sight of her out of the corner of his eye, dark hair hanging lank around her face, oversized t-shirt swallowed by flannel pajama pants. She stopped in the hallway, watching the twins on the couch. She didn't speak. She didn't leave, either. Anna noticed her first. Instead of staring or hiding, she just smiled. "Hi," Anna said softly. "You can sit if you want. We don't bite." Ava didn't move, but her fingers gripped the doorframe a little less tightly. She stood there like someone remembering a song they hadn't let themselves sing in a long time. Nathan watched them all, something unsteady and fragile moving in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment the silence in his house began to shift. That night, after the girls fell asleep together on the pull-out couch, tangled under a heap of extra blankets, Nathan sat alone at the small kitchen table. The cabin was quiet, except for the crackle of the stove and the wind testing the windows. On the shelf across from him sat a dusty wooden box with a small built-in microphone, an old school recorder he and his wife had used when they were still writing songs together, before life had turned into hospital rooms and empty beds. So, rooms and empty beds. Inside were the last recordings his wife had made with Eva as a little girl. Lullabies, giggles, half-finished harmonies. He hadn't opened that box since the funeral. Now, though, with 2 sleeping strangers in his living room and his daughter standing a few inches closer to them than she had to, he found himself reaching up and pulling it down. The clasp stuck, then gave with a soft click. He lifted the lid. For the first time in years, the past didn't feel like a weight dragging him backward. It felt like a bridge. The next morning dawned pale and quiet, light pushing weakly through frost-rimmed windows. Nathan moved on autopilot, pouring coffee, lighting the stove, boiling water for oatmeal. The twins were still asleep on the couch, curled into each other like commas. When he turned, he nearly jumped. Ava was already at the kitchen table, arms folded, staring at the steam rising from the mug he'd left for her. She hadn't made a sound coming in. "Are you okay with them staying a while?" he asked, voice low. She didn't answer with words, but her fingers shifted, curling around the mug instead of just touching it. That was enough. He nodded. "Good. I think they need it." He hesitated. "And maybe we do too." Her eyes lifted just for a second, enough for him to glimpse the girl who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen when her mom sang on the back porch. Later that morning, Anna and Alice woke up disoriented, then relieved when they remembered the warmth, the couch, the smell of coffee and cinnamon toast. They insisted on helping set the table, fumbling with mismatched plates and laughing at the stubborn toaster that refused to toast evenly. River watched from the doorway at first, half hidden behind the frame. "We saved you the blue cup," Alice called, pointing to the one with the chipped rim. "It's the only one that doesn't wobble." Ava hesitated, then stepped out. Out. She walked to the table, fingers brushing the cup like she was checking if it was real, then sat. Nathan held his breath. 3 girls, 1 table, no words from his own kid. But for the first time in a very long time, the house didn't feel hollow. It felt full. The snow kept falling that week. Full. School was cancelled. The roads stayed slick and unforgiving, buying Nathan time he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. During the days, the girls built lopsided snowmen in the yard and slid down the hill behind the shed on an old plastic sled Nathan had almost thrown out the year before. They argued over board game rules no one remembered properly. They burned toast and scraped it and ate it anyway. At night after dinner, something else started to happen. Music came back. It started small, Alice humming while she dried dishes, Anna tapping a beat on the table. A line of melody slipping out of someone's mouth before they could swallow it. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire glowed low and orange, the twins settled on the rug with mugs of cocoa. Anna began a little nonsense tune, half words and half humming. Alice joined in instinctively, finding a second line that fit under the first like it had been waiting there. Ava stood near the doorway, hands wrapped around her mug, eyes wide and thoughtful. Nathan sat on the arm of the couch, watching his daughter more than the twins. Then it happened, and it happened. Ha! A sound so soft he almost convinced himself he imagined it. A single note slipped from Eva's mouth, barely there, barely sound, but real. She clapped a hand over her lips as if she'd just broken something precious. Her eyes widened. She bolted, fleeing down the hall, vanishing into the dark of her room. Nathan exhaled like he'd been punched. The mug in his hand shook. He didn't need to say anything. He'd heard what he'd been waiting 2 years to hear. He found her 10 minutes later in the back seat of the old station wagon in the garage, knees pulled to her chest, breath fogging the cold air. He didn't open the car door right away, just rested his hand on the handle and leaned close. "I heard you," he said quietly. It was beautiful. Silence. "We don't have to be scared of your own voice in this house, Eva," he added. Not anymore, not anymore, not ever." There was a long pause. Then, so soft he barely caught it, she whispered, "I forgot I could." They sat there in the cold for a long time, not talking, just breathing. Just existing in the same small space without pretending everything was fine. Nathan had once believed music could fix anything. Now he knew better. Music didn't magically save people, but sometimes it opened the door, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, someone on the other side chose to walk through. That was how the 3 girls and a reluctant single dad became something like a band, long before they ever stood under stage lights, together. It started with a broken piano and an old guitar that hadn't sung in a decade, and it would lead them, whether they were ready or not, to a school talent show where people came expecting a joke and left wiping tears from their eyes. The piano broke on a Tuesday. By then, the twins had been with Nathan and Ava about 3 weeks. Social services had gotten involved after he called. Of course, there were forms, interviews, an angry visit from Aunt Carla that ended with her leaving in a squeal of tires and curses, and eventually a temporary placement order. No one was certain what would happen long term. But for now, the girls were staying. They belonged in that creaky little cabin in a way that made Nathan's chest hurt with equal parts joy and fear. "Again," Anna said, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the old upright piano, tapping the beat on her knee. Alice rolled her eyes but smiled. Standing behind the microphone, Nathan had dragged out of storage, the cable leading to a small worn recording box balanced on a chair. They weren't really recording anything yet. The little mic picked up more giggles and wrong notes than anything else, but it felt official. It felt like possibility. Ava sat on the piano bench, shoulders tense, fingers curled over the keys. Her voice had been coming back in scraps, soft hums, whispered lyrics, a line here and there. She still barely spoke in front of anyone except the twins and Nathan, but music was slowly stitching itself back into her days. "From the top," Alice said, grinning. No falling apart on the second verse this time. Eva rolled her eyes at her in a way that was so purely teenage that Nathan had to bite back a laugh in the doorway. She took a breath and began to play. The song was something they built together, A hymn for kids who didn't talk much, and kids who never shut up, and kids whose hearts were too big for their own chests. It wasn't complicated, just a gentle verse, a lifting chorus, a bridge that made Nathan's throat tighten every time Ava sang it. Or to the girl in the back who won't raise her hand, Anna and Alice sang together, eyes on Ava, to the boy in the hall with silence like sand. And then, clack, the note in the middle of the keyboard thunked like a dropped spoon on a tile floor. Ava jumped, yanking her hands back. She hit the same key again, dead, no sound, just a dull thud. Uh-oh, Alice muttered. Nathan hurried over, heart-dropping. He lifted the lid, poking through the dusty guts of the piano. A broken hammer, he murmured. Probably from all the cold in this old thing being stubborn. Ah, we can't play without it, was said hoarsely. Her shoulders were up around her ears. Her fingers trembled over her knees. Nathan looked up at her. The piano wasn't just wood and strings to her. It was armor, a place to hide behind while she tested out her courage. We'll shift it to guitar, he said. We've done that before. She shook her head, eyes welling. Not for this song. He saw it then, the fierce pride under the fear. This song wasn't just any song to her. It was hers. I'll fix it, he said. I don't care if I'm up all night. I'll fix it. He worked by lantern light, his breath clouding the cold garage air. Tiny screws, fragile felt, bent metal. His fingers cramped, his back screamed, his eyes blurred. He kept going anyway. He'd failed in 1,000 ways as a husband, a father, a man. He refused to add, didn't even try to fix the piano to that list. Around dawn, with his hands numb and his patience shredded, he pressed middle C. The note rang out, wobbly, a little sharp, but real. When the girls woke up, the whole house smelled like coffee and hope. Ava sat at the piano, touched the key carefully, and listened as it answered. She looked at Nathan, not with a big smile or dramatic tears, but with a tiny solid nod that meant more than any speech. That afternoon, they nailed the song in one long, trembling take. Nathan strummed the guitar softly, letting the girls' voices ride above it. Anna's clear and bright. Alice's smooth and steady, Uva's soft but strong, sitting on top of theirs like a fragile crown. They called the song a My Song for the Silent. Nathan uploaded the recording that night to a private link, filling out an online submission form for the District Youth Arts Showcase in Lincoln. 3 vocalists, 1 accompanist, a trio that technically didn't meet the rules, but definitely met something else. With the form asked for the group name, he hesitated, then typed, The Silent 3. He added a short note at the bottom. We know we don't fit your rules. We hope we fit your hearts. He clicked submit. The rejection didn't come from the jury. It came from grown-ups who should have known better. A letter arrived 2 days later from the district office, full of official language and careful politeness. They thanked him for the moving performance, and then explained that only students enrolled in district schools could participate in the showcase. Since one of his girls was homeschooled and the other 2 were only temporarily placed, the trio wasn't eligible. They encouraged individual entries from the girls who qualified. Nathan read the letter once, then again, the words blurring as anger rose hot and poisonous in his chest. He thought of Ember fainting on stage years ago, while adults whispered in the back row, "Roo." He thought of Anna and Alice hiding in a metal box because it still felt safer than home. He'd seen this before, the way institutions always seemed to find rules when vulnerable kids started shining too brightly. That night, he sat the girls at the kitchen table and read the letter aloud. Anna cried silently, her anger showing only in the way she squeezed her napkin into a tight ball. Alice stared at the wood grain like she could burn a hole straight through it with her eyes. Ava's face went blank, her jaw tight, shutting down the way she always did when something hurt too much. Too much. So we just don't go? Anna whispered. We just disappear again? No, Nathan said. His own voice surprised him with how calm it sounded. We record it anyway. We send it anyway. If they delete it, that's on them, not you. You don't get smaller just because they close a door. He turned to Ava. And if you want to write something new, something you want them to hear, even if they pretend not to, this is the time. Ava stared at him for a long moment, then got up without a word and went to her room. He thought she was shutting down again, retreating. She came back with a notebook. On the front page, in careful block letters, she'd written, "A song for the silent." "Then we start with this," she said quietly. They turned the cabin into a tiny studio. Quilts on the garage walls, microphone on the mantel, cables running like roots across the floor. The stove crackled. The coffee pot never emptied, The girls sang until their cheeks flushed and their voices turned husky. They recorded false starts and giggles and wrong lyrics, and then, one night when the snow outside looked almost blue in the dark, they got the take. When it ended, they all just sat there breathing. Nathan uploaded the new version to a free streaming site. No marketing, no plan, just a title. The Silent 3 songs for the ones who listen. In the description he wrote, for the kids who were told they were too quiet to matter, for the ones waiting to be heard. Here we are. He figured maybe a handful of friends would listen. Maybe Ellis, the school music teacher who dropped off sheet music and encouragement when no one else bothered, would share it with a few students. By morning, there were comments, not thousands, not viral, just a few. But they were enough to tilt the world. A school nurse in Ohio wrote, I played this for a kid who hasn't talked in months. He hummed along. A father in Vermont. My son stutters. He thinks he's alone. He doesn't anymore. A teenage girl in Oregon. I listened to your song on loop while drawing. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel broken. Thank you. A message appeared later from a girl named Avery in Montana. My mom died last year. I stopped talking. Yesterday, I played your song for my dog, and then I sang with him. I just wanted you to know. I think you helped me speak again. Sue? We've printed Avery's message and pinned it to the wall above her bed. Nathan saw her do it and said nothing. He just sat beside her and rested his hand over hers. He didn't feel like the father of something miraculous. He just felt like a dad. That was more than enough. Things snowballed in quiet, steady ways after that. A small-town newspaper ran a tiny article about 3 girls singing at a local talent show. A podcast host played a song for the silent and called it a 90 seconds of pure truth. A nonprofit in Chicago emailed to ask if they could use the song in a video about mental health. Then came the invitation that changed everything. A woman from the State Board of Cultural Affairs emailed Nathan directly. We heard your music. We'd like to invite the Silent 3 to perform one song as a special feature at the Youth Voices Gala in Lincoln. No judges, no rules, just a stage. If you say yes, we'll make room. Nathan read it 3 times, then looked at the 3 girls sprawled across the living room floor. Anna sketching cover art for their Not Really a Band, Alice writing lyrics in the margins of an old math notebook, Ava humming under her breath as she read a dog-eared book. He felt scared. A dog-eared book. He felt scared. He said yes anyway. The theater in Lincoln was nothing like the school auditorium where Ava had once passed out under fluorescent lights. This place glowed. Polished wood floors, soft gold lights, rows of plush seats that swallowed sound and sent it back warm. Backstage smelled like makeup and dust and nerves. They weren't the main event. They weren't even listed on the printed program with a big headline. But at the bottom, in small letters, were 3 words. Closing performance, the Silent 3. Nathan tuned his old guitar in the wings, fingers moving automatically over the strings. His palms were slick. His throat felt tight. He'd played bigger shows back in the day, before grief turned his life into a smaller, quieter thing. But he'd never played one where the stakes felt like this. This wasn't about record deals or applause. This was about a girl who'd once chosen silence to survive, walking back into the light. A stagehand gave them a cue. The stage lights dimmed, voices in the audience faded. The host gave a brief closing thank you, then stepped aside. No big introduction, no dramatic build-up, just room. Anna walked out first, heart hammering. Chin up anyway. Alice followed, fingertips brushing her sister's sleeve like they always did when they were nervous. Ava came last, notebook left backstage, hands empty, face pale, but eyes steady. Nathan stepped out with them, taking his seat a little off to the side, guitar cradled in his lap. He strummed the opening chord. Ava took one breath, then another, and she sang. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, it wasn't the kind of performance that made people scream. It was the kind that made them hold their breath. Her voice was softer than the twins, but carried something theirs didn't. A history of swallowed words and nights staring at ceilings. A weight that somehow made the notes feel weightless. Anna came in on the next line, her clear tone wrapping around Abba's like sunlight. Alice slid under both of them, weaving a harmony so gentle it almost didn't seem real. We were made for music. They sang together, even if we never make a sound. We were made for more than fading. More than fading. We were made to be found. Nathan's fingers shook. He kept playing anyway, staying just behind them, never on top. This wasn't his song. It was theirs. At the bridge, Ava stepped a little closer to the mic. I used to think my silence meant I was broken, she sang. But now I know it was just waiting to be music. The line floated out into the theater and hung there. When the last chord faded, there was a stillness so complete it hurt. Then the room stood up. The applause wasn't wild or chaotic. It was something else, deep, full-bodied, like a heartbeat echoing against the walls. People wiped their eyes openly. A teenage boy in a varsity jacket mouthed, "Holy crap." An older woman pressed a hand over her chest. A man in a suit blinked rapidly and looked away as if embarrassed by his own tears. Backstage, no one rushed them for autographs. No one shoved business cards into their palms. People just came, one by one, to say thank you. That was my daughter's story. A woman in a cardigan said, voice unsteady. She hasn't spoken in months. I wish she could have heard you live tonight. I wish she could have heard you live tonight. She will, was said quietly. Though the recordings are all online, for free. Nathan nearly dropped his guitar. She'd spoken to a stranger. After the gala, opportunities trickled in. A radio interview, an invitation to play at a youth center, a request from a school counselor for permission to use their song in group sessions. Nathan kept waiting for it all to fade, for the world to lose interest like it always did. It didn't. Not because the girls were famous, they weren't. Not because the songs were perfect, they weren't. It was something simpler. The world was full of quiet kids. Some of them were finally hearing themselves. Months passed. Snow melted. Grass grew. The air softened around the cabin. Fecking. The Silent Three did something no one expected. They didn't chase bigger stages. They went smaller. They played in church basements and school gyms and community centers that smelled like burnt coffee and dust. They sang for kids in rehab programs and women in shelters and men in halfway houses. They sang in places where people sat with their arms crossed, faces hard, and walked out with eyes red and shoulders looser. Nathan jokingly called it the Echo Tour. The girls liked the name so much they wrote it on the side of the van someone donated after hearing their story. One night, after a show in a tiny community center in Hastings, they drove home through a light rain. The wipers squeaked. The road hummed under the tires. The girls slept in a tangled pile in the back. Alice, the music teacher who had become part of their unofficial team, sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the wet streaks of pine trees. Nathan drove in silence, but his mind was loud. He thought this whole wild thing was about helping Ava heal. About giving Anna and Alice some sense of safety. Maybe about easing his own guilt for all the ways he'd failed. But somewhere along the way, the shows had turned into something else. A long, slow stitching of invisible seams, pulling his life back together in places he hadn't even realized were torn. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Ava's head rested on Anna's shoulder. Alice's hand was flopped across both of them, fingers twitching in some half-dreamed rhythm. He couldn't hear any music in the van just then. He didn't need to. The next big invitation came from the Whitmore Civic Center, the same venue where they'd first sung for strangers months before. Only this time, it wasn't a 10-minute slot squeezed into someone else's event. They were being asked to headline the Youth Voices Gala. No auditions, no rules. No, technically you don't qualify letters. Just a simple message. Bring the music. We'll handle the rest. When the email came, Nathan read it out loud at the dinner table, half expecting the girls to squeal and scream and bounce in their seats. They didn't. They just looked at each other with that rare, deep understanding that came from sharing too many hard things in too short a time. "But do you want to do it?" he asked. "Yes," Ava said firmly, surprising even herself. "Yes," Anna echoed. Alice didn't say anything. She just picked up her pencil and wrote one word at the top of a blank page in her notebook. Again. The night of the gala felt almost unreal. The stage was bigger, the lights brighter, the audience fancier. There were photographers, people in nice clothes, name tags, catered snacks. Nathan's hands shook as he tuned his guitar backstage. Ava adjusted the mic on stage with calm, sure hands. Anna and Alice stood on either side of her, no longer just guests in his home or kids he'd rescued from a metal box, but something else. His family. They didn't open with a song for the silent that night. They opened with a new song, one Ava had written as a duet with Nathan, then turned into something all four of them could sing. "I found my voice in the space between your silence." The first line went. You waited while I remembered how to speak. The whole theater leaned in. They followed it with the lullaby Nathan's late wife had started writing years before, a song that had lived as scribbles in an old notebook. until Eva finished the lines in her own handwriting. By the time they finally ended with a song for the silent, no one in the room was looking at their phones. When the show was over, after the hugs and the handshakes and the offers Nathan carefully wrote down, without promising anything, the four of them ended up back where everything had started, in the small living room of a drafty cabin, faces lit by firelight instead of stage lights, no microphones. Oh, microphones. No cameras, no expectations, just Nathan with his guitar, Alice curled in an armchair with a mug of tea, and three girls sitting cross-legged on the floor, leaning against each other like they'd been born that way. Nay, they sang softly, not to impress anyone, not to record anything, just because it felt wrong not to. When the last note faded, silence settled over the room, but it wasn't the old heavy kind. It was warm, full, alive. A dad, Eva said quietly. Nathan looked up, startled. She didn't call him that often out loud. The words still felt like a gift every time. Yeah, kiddo. She handed him a folded piece of paper. I wrote you something. Don't read it now. Just someday. He slipped it into his pocket like it was made of glass. Weeks later, on a slow Sunday afternoon with the sun melting snow into dripping streams outside and the house weirdly, peacefully calm, he remembered it. He went out onto the porch, sat on the top step, and unfolded the letter. Dear Dad, it began in Ava's neat handwriting. I don't remember the first time you sang to me, but I remember the first time you stopped. I know why you did. Grief is loud. Silence is heavy. I was so scared of making it worse that I tried to disappear inside it. But you waited. You waited when I couldn't talk. You waited when I couldn't sing. You waited when I ran away from microphones and people, and even from you. You never made me feel broken for being quiet. You just stayed. That's what saved me. Whatever I do next with my voice, shows, songs, helping other kids, it's all because you held the space for it. The space for it. My voice exists because of yours, and that's the voice I'm going to keep. Love, Beaver. Nathan didn't realize he was crying until a tear hit the edge of the page and blurred the ink. The screen door creaked. Ava stepped out, hands stuffed into the pockets of her sweatshirt. That's too shirt. Too cheesy, she asked, cheeks pink. He shook his head, laughing through the lump in his throat. It's perfect, he said. You're perfect. She rolled her eyes in the universal teenage language for you're embarrassing, then sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that until the sun dipped low and the cold came back. In the end, there was no fairy tale ending with mansions or platinum records or world tours. No overnight fame, no dramatic final scene where everything was magically fixed. What there was instead was this: a single dad named Nathan Cole who thought his life had ended the day his wife died, finding out it could begin again. A girl named Ava who once decided never to speak on stage again, choosing not only to sing but to help other kids do the same. For two twins, Anna and Alice, who'd been treated like a burden, standing in front of audiences and reminding them that quiet and Ovik are not the same thing. Three voices that almost never got heard, becoming the ones people couldn't forget. And somewhere out there, maybe in Montana, maybe next door, maybe on the other side of the world, a kid pressed play on a Silent 3 song, hummed along for the first time, and felt something crack inside their chest. Not a breaking, an opening, an opening. Because sometimes the voices we almost never hear are the ones that stay with us the longest,